Hi there! You are tuning in with Lorraine Chai, the author of Stringstastic music theory books for violin, viola, and cello. Today we'll be looking at how you can teach simple time signatures to your students, or how you should be introducing, or how I would recommend to introduce time signatures or simple time to students. So first of all, your students need to be able to understand the note values and the rest values in regards to 1 count, 2 counts, 3 counts, and 4 counts. So they need to be absolutely sure in regards to the values of the rests and notes. I will be using examples from my books, and then we'll see how we go. So let me share my screen and we'll look at, this is from my ensemble series on violin, but it's also available on viola, cello, on my mini series, as well as my graded studies. So let's look at this. So they, as I mentioned, they have to be able to remember or recognize the value of the notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the rest itself. So let's look at time signatures, shall we? Now, time signatures, if you see here, don't worry about the top part, depending on which country, whether or not it's a quarter beat in a bar or measure. It depends on what country. It's more of the concept of how you introduce this, yeah? So let's look at this. We've got 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4. So this is simple time, but I'm not going to explain to students that it's a simple time. This is just time signature for beginners. When you look at 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, tell students, I am not going to worry about the number below, because there's so much for them to learn, right? So we want to make learning as simple as possible, because too much information, it's like a system overload. It's like a computer system during the day, where if you have too much material in the computer, whether or not it's during the day or now, your computer would not be able to register the information properly or at full capacity, right? So tell them, don't worry about the number at the bottom. What you need to worry about is the number on the top that changes, okay? So if you see the number on the top, that means that there is 2 counts, or I like to say 2 seconds in a bar, 3 seconds, 4 seconds in a bar. But instead of using that, I tend to use props, or I tend to use graphics, right? So I say, let's look at this. 2/4 is as if saying each group is allowed to only have 2 cakes per class. This is the first class, second class, and third class. If you haven't already listened to my video on bar lines and bars, or measures and bar lines, I explain it in a manner where a measure or a bar is like a classroom or a building or a school, where each bar or each measure is a classroom. So this is how I explain it, right? So that's 1 class, that's the second class, that's the third class. So remember, 2/4 means each class is allowed to get 2 cakes. Now, I am going to do some markings here, and this is how I explain it. So 2 cakes, right? So 2 cakes, get them to visualize. 2 cakes, brilliant. I'm going to label it as cake number 1 and cake number 2. Okay, great. The next thing I am going to be doing is this. So I'm just going to change the color, because, okay, so I'm going to change the color, maybe not just yet. I am going to change the color. Okay, I'm going to change the color later, and this is what's going to happen. So 2/4 means each class is allowed to have 2 cakes, correct? So 2, 2, 2, 2. But each class has students. Depending on how many students, we'll look at it. So let's look at this. 2/4 here has 2 students, right? This student and this student. Now the first student, how many counts or how many seconds is he? And they tell you it's 1. 1. Sometimes you have students writing this, right? If you ask them to write the key signature, or the time signature, sorry, and they do this. They are actually not wrong. They are actually right, because that shows that they understand the concept of note value. They understand that this is 2 counts. They understand that this is 2 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1. What they don't understand is how they should write it. in the musical sense, in terms of the beats, right? Because they don't quite understand the word beats. So this is, with this reference on the cake, this is how I explain it. Cake number 1, cake number 2. We've got these two students here. This guy is allowed to get cake number 1, correct? Okay, so this guy gets cake number 1. Takes cake number 1. Now, since he already has taken cake number 1 is unavailable, which means this guy, he's allowed to get also 1 cake, but what is available? Cake number 2. So he gets cake number 1. So let's look at it carefully. He gets cake number 1, he gets cake number 2, correct? Okay, let's move on. So next guy, remember, we're gonna refresh it. So this class has 2 cakes, or 2 lollies, or 2 sweets. 2 cakes, or 2 cupcakes. So 2 cakes, this first student gets cake number 1. So let's write 1 down first. Now this cake is unavailable anymore, it's not available. Next, this guy is allowed to get 1 cake. And what cake is available? Cake number 2. Ooh, good. And there you have it. Brilliant. Let's look at the next class. Now the next class, let's refresh it. So he's got 2 cakes per class, right? So there's 2 cakes available. This guy is the only guy in this class. How many cakes is he allowed to get? 2 cakes. Brilliant. So he gets cake number 2. Hang on. I thought you said he's supposed to get 2 cakes, right? Oh, he gets cake number 1 and cake number 2. There you go. Does that make sense? All right, next class, sorry. Next class, refresh. It's got 2 cakes available there, and there's only 1 student. So which cakes is he allowed to get? He's allowed to get 2 cakes. Which one? Cake number 1 and cake number 2. Brilliant. So that's on a 2-4 time, correct? Now I'm just going to very quickly look at or show 3. So let's look at 3. So I'm going to introduce the third cake. Third cake, now this one means how many cakes can each class get? And then they say 3. How do you know? Because of the number on the top, which says 3. Great. What about this one? How many cakes each class is allowed to get? 4 cakes. And this one, 4 cakes. How do you know? Remember, it's a process of asking and repeating your questions. How do you know? It's because the top number says 4. So let's look at this very carefully. 3, 4. 3 cakes available for each class. Ooh, yummy, yummy. So let's look at that. So we have the first student up front. He is allowed to get how many cakes? 1 cake. So remember, if a student does this, it's correct, right? But remember, we want it to be in this process where we're talking about beats. So far, I'm only talking about cakes. So let's look at this. This guy is allowed to get 1 cake. So he gets cake number 1. He's not going to get cake number 2 because cake number 1's in front. So he gets cake number 1. This guy is allowed to get 2 cakes, right? But cake 1 is already taken. So he gets cake number 2. Is that all? I thought he's supposed to have 2 cakes. So he's supposed to get cake number 2 and cake number 3. Brilliant. Now next, a refresh. So let's put that back. Next, this guy is the first guy in this class, and he's allowed to get 1 cake because he's 1 count or 1 second. So he gets cake number 1. So now because he's taken cake number 1 is not available. Next student, he's supposed to be getting 1 cake, right? He's allowed to get only 1 cake. So he gets cake number 2. And then the last student, he's allowed to get 1 cake as well, and he gets the leftover cake, which is cake number 3. Let's look at the next one. So refresh, because remember, each class has 3 cakes. So this guy is in front of the class, and he is allowed to get 2 cakes. So he's allowed to get cake number 1 and 2. So 1 and 2. Remember, if it's good that kids visualize it, that's why I'm drawing your cakes here. If you want to, you can draw sweets or lollies. All right, so this one has taken cake number 1 and 2. So this one, he gets the leftover, which is cake number 3. Brilliant. Now the last guy, or the last class, there's only 1 student there, and he's getting all the cakes. He's a bit of a lucky guy. So he's allowed to get 3 cakes, which means he gets cake number 1, 2, 3. He gets all of the cakes. Ooh, lucky student. There you go. That is how I explain the simple times or introduce simple times to students. And with that, the process of the way that they think is quicker. After that, then you can kind of introduce in terms of compound time. But that will be the next topic. If you have another way of teaching time signature or introducing time signature and you would like to share, please do. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, and share my video. Until next time.